Hello everyone. My group is made up of Catalina del Valle, Karen Duque, Maria Jose Marrugo, Julicia Santos, and myself, Isabel Castillo. And in the following presentation, we will explain elaborating. Okay, in elaborating, students focus on a specific grammatical feature while including new information to basic writings to create them fuller or more complete. As students advance as language learners, they are naturally anticipated to deliver more modern writings and to master more advanced sophisticated tests. The interface between the more difficult grammar construction they are learning how this construction can really be used to make the writings they are composing more viable is not continuously made clear to them. Elaborating activities can offer support to dramatize for them the truth that learning grammar structure is not around correctness, but that it is, to begin with, and predominant approximately picking up control over resources for making communication more viable. Strategies. Okay, in this method, calling learners' attention to both the value of elaboration and the grammatical feature is done using addressing techniques in which certain questions are asked about a less elaborate test that is presented to the student at the beginning of the activity. One way this questioning technique can be introduced is through simultaneous exercises in which students actually inquire about other people's questions to induce them to expand on something they have just said or written. However, it illustrates that learning will start to internalize this procedure and apply them when they are creating tests, considering how they could quickly advance the writings they have now delivered or critiquing tests produced by others.
Now, we're going to talk about our lesson plan, which contains the activities that we are about to explain, and you will see the use of our topic, that is, elaborating.
In this part, the warm-up, the students will join in pairs, student A and student B. The student A is going to create an interesting situation or gossip that is not going to be very detailed and is going to tell that situation or gossip to student B. Then student B is going to ask the questions that are necessary to make a text in which he or she is going to write the situation or the gossip organized and with all the details. The first point of this part, called noticing, we are going to read a dialogue that is a conversation between an inspector and a witness called Amanda Butterfield. Then the students have to create a brainstorm of some questions, like they would like to know more about what happened. In the second point, we are going to read the rest of the conversation on the worksheet and ask students about the new information that they have about the story. In the third point, we are going to give the students the worksheet and direct their attention to table 1, as you can see in the table on your left. The students have to fill in the table with the new information from the conversation. Then we are going to explain and ask them to put in the left column events that happen before the events and put in the right column events that happen at the same time as or after the events. And they have to use the same verb tense that appear in the conversation. As you can see in the table on your right is the suggested answers with the information that the students could write in the table. For example, in the left column before the event, they could write Mr. Wu hadn't had his dinner and Miss Butterfield had seen the car parked across the street from the house about a week before. And in the right column during the event, they could write Miss Butterfield thought it was a bit unusual and Miss Butterfield was cleaning the kitchen. In the fourth point of the next part called exploring, the students have to discuss the following questions. First, what verb tense or tenses appear in the left column? Second, what verb tense or tenses appear in the right column? In the third question, they have to find the clause in the right column that talks about doing actions, the clause that talks about the thoughts or feelings of the characters, and the clause that talks about what someone or something is like or appears to be like. So the question is, what verb tenses are used in each of these clauses? Fourth, why is the verb tense in the left column of the first row different from those in the rows below? And fifth, can you come to any conclusion about how verb tenses are used when elaborating information in a story? The suggested answers for the fourth point that the students could write are: for the first question, past perfect tense and past perfect continuous tense. For the second question, past tense and past continuous tense. For the third question, in the right column, the clause about doing is Miss Butterfield was cleaning the kitchen and is past continuous tense. The clause about thoughts or feelings is Miss Butterfield thought it was a bit unusual and is the simple past tense. And the clause about what someone or something is like is he, Mr. Wu, looked upset and is the simple past tense. For the fourth question, the action of playing golf took place over a period of time up until or almost up until Mr. Wu returned home. The actions of not eating dinner at the expected time and of seeing the car parked across the street occurred at distinct points in the time in the past. And for the fifth question, in these possible answers, they write an explanation of how and when to use each past tense. In the fifth point, we have to give some feedback to students on their answers.
Now we're going to start the practice phase. The first step of this phase is step number 6. We're going to be directing students' attention to the elaborating narrative and asking them to underline where the new information has been inserted. A suggested answer for step 6 is seen in this slide. For example, students underline, he had been out playing golf all day. I thought it was a bit unusual because he hadn't had his dinner yet. While I was cleaning the kitchen, I had seen the same car parked across the street from the house about a week before. We can notice that all of these sentences are in past tenses. Now, in step 7, we're going to direct a student's attention to table 2, the one that you're seeing right now. We're going to tell them that additional information has been added in the right and left columns, but that they will have to change the sentences to the appropriate verb tense. In step 8, we're going to be asking students to write an elaborated narrative of the second part of the story based on the information in the table. This means that based on table 2, shown on the previous slides, students will create the continuation of the story they have been working with. A suggested answer for this step can be seen at the bottom of this slide. You can pause the video if you want to take a look at it. Now, in the last step of practicing, step 9, we're going to be checking students' answers and giving them feedback.
It is common to see that in these type of activities, students are worried about what is the correct way to complete text in order to make them more complex. And besides, they are thinking about how to apply grammar in a correct way. In general, students have been taught about the uses of verbal tenses, rules, and completing text and adding information. It is probably that explanations are unlikely to be of much help to students in actually using these tenses appropriately. However, teaching grammar should be different. It is important that our students know what is the importance to use verbal tenses in a specific clause or phrase in a text, what is its function and differences. When it is talked about past perfect, we often say we use past perfect to say that something had already happened before a time in the past, but the real function of the verbal tense is typically used in clauses that represent events or states that occur before events in the storyline. These sometimes constitute a series of events that took place at a time before the story begins. A common use it is in an event in the storyline. It is evaluated through comparison with some previous event. For example, I had never seen anything like it. On the other hand, when we talk about past continuous, we use explanations like it is used to say that someone hadn't finished doing something when something else occurred. And as I mentioned before, those are not the real function of that tenses. Past continuous tense is typically used in clauses that indicates the reader what events are in progress, either as the story is about to begin or as later events in the storyline occur. Regarding past perfect continuous tense, it is used with actions which began at a point in the past relative to an event being related and continue up until the time of that event. It is possible to write a simple narrative using just action process and process clauses and simple past tense. And this is how students usually start to write. However, as they attempt to write more sophisticated text, they will need to develop control over the grammatical resources that enable them to elaborate such narrative. Students need to understand that different verbal tenses are associated with different ways of elaborating on a narrative for different rhetorical purposes. For example, one way to provide descriptive background in a story is talk about what was occurring contemporaneous with events in a story, in which case we typically use past continuous tense with action processes. Example, I was taking a bath when the phone rang.
If we go back to a common grammar class, we can see that teachers usually teach using a structure like subject plus verb plus object. But if we analyze that, if we teach something by using elaborated, students will be able to make their own analysis and develop their own opinion about a subject. For example, if we give to the students a situation to create a test, students could be naturally expected to produce more sophisticated text and add more information to master grammatical features.